just show you some real world results of what the graph shows and what the target shows. Let a lot of people make their own decisions as to how they want to use this tool. And I'm going to say it again. I've said it before. The AMP press is just a tool. It is not a magic bullet. It's not going to, magically show you exactly how to shoot, X's every time. This graph, and I've said this before, and again, I'll say it again, it can be manipulated. You can, by nature of how you do your brass, by how you know, lube, don't lube, anneal, trim, whatever, chamfer, deburr, all those things are going to affect this graph. You can manipulate the data. If this was the test and you said, well, this has to be a straight line, well, guess what? I could get to a point where I make it a straight line. That doesn't necessarily mean that for how I load, that it would translate to great on target results. It might for somebody else, but how you reload is going to dictate what your graphs look like. So I really, from my perspective, if somebody asks, I say, well, you need to use your procedure and don't try to manipulate your procedure to a particular graph result until you've had a chance to see what do your graphs look like and what does your on target look like. And then you can kind of go from there. If you're getting weird anomalies, then yes, it could be how you anneal or how you're sizing or how you're doing whatever. Um, but this is just my opinion, but I think I think the wrong thing to do is to say, well, there was one perfect graph and I need to change all of my loading procedures to meet that particular graph because I don't think that serves a good purpose. What I do think that the AMP does is it's an excellent gauge of your reloading process for how you do it. Now, I happen to be okay with what this graph looks like, and I'm going to show you in a minute how it translates onto a real world target. And I've done a lot of this kind of stuff. I did 400 something rounds for Southwest Nationals. And you're going to ask, well, after the results you see, why did you pull out the highs and lows? Like for Southwest Nationals, I would have pulled out these top two and top bottom ones. Well, because I can. Like, do I really think it makes a difference? No, I really don't. But I do think it makes a mental difference when I go to the match and I say, well, at least I know that all of my other rounds are in a tighter, final seeding force group or whatever. But it also is the reason why I don't worry about whether my ciders are telling me the truth or not. You also see some discrepancies down here on the entry force. I happen to run really heavy neck tension. I don't turn necks and I don't clean out the inside of my necks with anything and I don't use any kind of lube. So you know what? Yeah, I am going to see some erraticness down here. Again, for me personally, this doesn't mean it's perfect for everybody. It just means that for me, I know I'm okay with that. So there's things I look for because I know what my graph should look like. This is sort of my signature, or some form of this is going to be my signature, just like a lot of people are going to get their signature graph for how they load and know what that translates to on paper. So you can see here that high to low is about a 44 peak force difference. That's much higher than AMP will tell you probably want, or at least I'm pretty sure that's higher than they tell you want. It's probably higher than other people on the internet tell you want. I'll tell you, for me, I don't care. For me, I'm perfectly happy with that. If it's tighter, great. Would I want it much wider? No, not really. But this is about average for how I load, and I know what it does, again, for me. So looking at this, looking at the numbers, it goes from about 80 down here up to 115 up here. Or yeah, so 80, so what, 35, sorry, 30, no, 124 is the highest. Yeah, so 44 peak force difference. Let me show you first what that looks like on my lab radar, and I think you're going to be fairly surprised looking at this and then looking at the results there. Loaded 25 rounds. I shot 24, and you'll see on the target here in a minute. I shot 4 ciders plus 20 for record. I kept 1 round in reserve, which I always do in case there was a problem with one of my 20 record rounds. I don't like being left hanging where I can't finish a string. So we had 24 fired shots. We had an ES of 21, an SD of 5.41. This is well within my acceptable range. I'm good with anything at this number or lower. I used to really strive for like 12 or 13 or 14. I really don't care anymore. Anything around 20 or lower, I'm really happy with. My SD is right where I want it to be. So this is really good. You can see where my highs and lows were. And you can see what my average was, and that just happens to be the particular node that I'm shooting right now. So let's look at the graph next to the real world target. Real world is, how does this match up to this? Is there really a correlation? Truth is, I don't know. I mean, if we backtrack a little bit, I can make this graph do any number of things. I can make it make more of a straight line. I can make it do a bit of a curve. I can induce bigger humps through these seeding areas. The truth is, you can have a lot of different graph sort of peculiarities based on how you chamfer, how you lube, how you expand, how you anneal, the brand of brass. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into what this graph looks like. I am fully convinced that there is no right graph. I've used this thing enough, and I'll just tell you, I don't think there is a right way. Like, you can't just load until you see a particular kind of graph and then say, oh, it's going to shoot perfect. It doesn't work like that. I think there are graphs that match up to different reloading styles and things to look for. But the truth is, I'm plenty happy with this graph, and I'm not going to waste time trying to make it more perfect because I know what the on paper results are. I've done enough of the graphs that look like this to know that I can shoot like this every time. So what do we have? Well, let me start with the target. So we've got a 600-yard target. We shot 4 sighters, 20 for record. It's about a 4-inch group. It's a bigger group than I'd like, but that's just the way it goes. 19 almost got away from me. But overall, it's a nicely centered up group, and none of my shots were held for elevation. So everything I did was along the horizontal from X out to 2 left, and that was about it. It was about maybe 1 to 3 mile an hour, little bit of switchy winds, but nothing too crazy. So I did not. None of these shots are because of a hold in elevation up or down. I kept along the horizontal here, and these are all just indicative of whatever the round was doing or the weather out there. So if we try to find any kind of comparison, I think you're going to be surprised that there may not be any. I think for me, I don't really care about seeing this stuff down here, and I don't really care about the spread up here. I just know that in general, my rounds should look about like this. So you might say, well, this one's got some weird, entry force down here. Okay, well, shots trace 1 through 4 were my sighters. Trace 5 I didn't shoot. Trace 6 is the first one for record. So if we count up, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Shot number 13. Okay, so shot number 13 is right here, nice centered up X. Okay, so obviously it's in the middle of the peak force. It's got this wonky, starting force down here. It shot just fine. Let's look at the other end of it. So we've got this one on the top side. Again, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Shot 11. Absolutely dead center. So that's why I'm at least convinced that what happens down here isn't affecting what's happening on target here. So I'm okay with that. So then you look and you go, okay, well, what about up here? Okay, well, that's going to be shot number 2. Uh, Shot number 2 is right here, dead center. So there's number 2. And then if we go to the bottom, I think it's that one right there. Yeah, 80. Let me see. I think that's the lowest one. Yeah, so this one here. So this one had a peak force of 80. So that's number 7. So that's shot number 3, which is just on the hair high side. Okay, so all right, so lower force, maybe it went a little bit higher. But if we look at shot number 1, so 1, 2, 3, so right here, this would sort of contradict that. This is on the higher end of peak force, and it was also up there where the lowest peak force is. Again, no hold for elevation. Everything was along the horizontal. So you've got, these 2 shots. If we go down and look at this flyer, if we go down and look at 19, that kind of got away from me. It was obviously a bad wind call. It still would have been a low 10, but it was a bad wind call, but it definitely got away from me a little bit. So if we look at that, that's going to be this trace right here, and it's dead center. I mean, it's about as pretty as it looks down the middle. It's right down the middle here, finishes in the middle of peak force, and yet it had, it would have been no matter what down here along the bottom. If we look at another low one, so here's shot number 5, so that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that one here is on the peak force. That's very high, which is low. if we look at another low one, that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, number 10. So that's dead center. All right. So here you have shots 3 and 10 that are both right here on the low end of peak force, with, and probably, what is that, an inch and a half difference in vertical, which to be fair isn't a whole lot. But I think the point is that, look, I care about what it does on target. I love the amp press. I'm still a big proponent of it, and I still love using it. But I don't think that you can go to this and say, well, I need it to look a certain way so that it translates over here, because I think it's real easy to find contradictory points. What I do think it's important to understand is that the amp press is a tool, and how you use that tool has a large impact on what you end up doing on target. And I know what I want to see in my particular amp press. Like, if I had a really low one down here, yeah, that would concern me. Or if I had something that started, way over here, that's going to tell me there's something weird about the brass. So, you know, is it still usable for sorting? Absolutely. But does it really matter if I pull out the high and the low here? No. Does it make me feel better, like at a big match for Southwest Nationals? Absolutely. If you remember, I did 430 rounds, each box of 100. I did this way. I pulled out the highs and low anomalies. Now, the reality is, I can show you that it probably didn't make a difference, but I can tell you mentally it 100% made a difference, because it gave me that much more confidence, just pulling out the outliers, that if there was something weird about them, I at least identified them. But at the same time, you can see here, it's not really that big a deal in my mind. High force to low force is about a 44 spread. And, I know that's more than the guys at AMP will tell you want. And I totally respect that. They've put a lot of work and effort into this. They've done a lot of testing to know what they want it to look like. I'm just telling you that, there is definitely some correlation to making sure that the chart looks the way you want it to look. But if you have a different loading procedure than I do, and I tell you, well, look, this is the graph you want to see to get these results, it may not correspond, because you might do it, you might lube your necks. Well, I don't lube my necks. You might turn your brass. I don't turn brass. You might stainless tumble. Well, I tumble in rice and my carbon is still inside the necks. And you might use a different expander mandrel, and I use gauge pins, and I run 3 thousandths or 4 thousandths or 5 thousandths neck tension, and you run 1 thousandths neck tension. Well, all of those things are going to have a huge effect on what this graph looks like, and it's going to have a huge effect on what these targets look like. I shoot this every week. This particular gun gets graph result, or the ammo I load for this gun, it gets pretty much these looking results. For the last 8 weeks, I've been shooting. This is like middle of the range for me with this ammo. I've shot like my top 6 targets right now for our league are 214, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 218X. So this is right in the middle of what I've shot with this ammo. So this is not an isolated test. I can repeatably do this with the graph looking like this, and with results like this. So, that's how I use my amp. I think how everybody uses it is going to be a little bit different. I think that's one of the cool things about the amp. And it's something that, I've said kind of from the beginning, which is I think different people are going to find different uses for the amp press. It is not a one size fits all kind of tool. And I think that makes it pretty cool. But if you're going to get one, just understand what you can do with it, what you should do with it, and how it's going to show you different things in your loading process that you might want to look at refining. So, the only other thing I can add in is, you also saw my lab radar data. My lab radar data, despite whatever these peak force numbers are and my entry force numbers and all these things, you can see that I'm running really good SDs, really good ESs. It's absolutely right in the range that I want it to be at. So I have no complaints about that either. So, when I put this together with the on target, with the consistency of my chrono speeds, that just leaves me feeling very, very confident every time I go out to the range. So that's what I use my amp press for. I know this is becoming a weirdly contested subject for some reason, but I just wanted people to see what the real world is for me and how I've been using it. So I hope that helps you guys out. Um, hope things are going well. I'll do more of this. I'll show you guys more real world results, and we'll have fun with it. So talk to you guys later. Have a good one.